The lecture hall of the Galactic Academy of Natural Sciences was filled with students from 12 different star systems, and every single one of them was nervous about what Professor Vixothel was about to announce. The professor was a Kelzari, a tall creature with 6 limbs and skin that changed color based on his mood, and right now his skin was a deep purple that meant he was feeling quite serious about something important. "Students," he began, his voice echoing through the massive room, "your final examination will not be a written test, and it will not be a simple laboratory assignment." A wave of worried whispers spread through the crowd of alien students, and Marcus Chun, the only human in the entire class, leaned forward, in his seat with curiosity rather than fear. Professor Vixothel pressed a button on his podium, and a holographic image appeared in the center of the room, showing a creature that made several students gasp in horror. The creature in the hologram was called a void maw, and it was perhaps the most terrifying predator in the known galaxy. Its body seemed to be made of living shadows, constantly shifting and moving like smoke in the wind. It had 8 eyes that glowed like dying stars, and its mouth was filled with teeth that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. "Your assignment," the professor continued, "is to travel to the death world of Nexus 7 and capture one of these creatures alive." A Thion student in the front row fainted immediately, and 2 of his classmates had to drag him out of the lecture hall. The Void Maw is an apex predator that has killed more galactic marines than any other creature in recorded history, Professor Vixothel explained, his skin now shifting to a darker shade. It feeds on fear itself, sensing the psychic energy that prey animals release when they are terrified. No species has ever successfully captured one alive, and most who try do not return at all. Marcus raised his hand, and the professor's antennae twitched with what might have been amusement or possibly annoyance. "Yes, the human student has a question," Vixothel said, and every alien in the room turned to look at Marcus with expressions ranging from pity to confusion. "Sir, what does the Void Maw eat besides fear?" Marcus asked in a calm voice. "Like, what? Does it actually put in its mouth for nutrition?" The lecture hall went completely silent, and Professor Vixothel blinked all 4 of his eyes several times before responding. "That is an unusual question, Mr. Chun," the professor said slowly. "The creature primarily hunts warm-blooded animals native to Nexus 7, but the specifics of its diet have not been extensively studied because researchers tend to die before completing their observations." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, and the Ulithian student next to him shifted her gelatinous body away from him with obvious discomfort. "Students will form teams of 5, Professor Vixothel announced. "Equipment will be provided, including sonic barriers, electromagnetic containment units, and emergency teleportation beacons. The team that returns with a living Void Maw specimen will receive the highest honors this academy can bestow. Everyone else will be graded simply on whether or not they survive." After the lecture ended, students gathered in the hallway to form their teams, and Marcus found himself standing alone as group after group politely declined his request to join them. "I am sorry, human," said Crystal, a Kelzari student whom Marcus had considered a friend, "but your species is from a death world, and your methods are known to be strange and unpredictable. We cannot risk having you do something unexpected during the hunt." Marcus tried not to feel hurt by the rejection, but it was difficult when every single team gave him the same answer. The truth was that humans had a reputation throughout the galaxy, and it was not entirely a good one. Humans came from Earth, a planet so dangerous that most species classified it as a Category 7 death world. Humans had evolved alongside predators, diseases, and natural disasters that would have wiped out most other intelligent species. But the strangest thing about humans, the thing that made other species most uncomfortable, was their habit of forming emotional bonds with dangerous creatures. The galactic databases contained extensive warnings about this behavior, noting that humans had somehow convinced wolves, one of Earth's most effective pack predators, to become their companions and protectors. The human will work alone, Professor Vixothel announced when he saw that no team had accepted Marcus. This is permitted under Academy rules, though it is not recommended. That night, Marcus sat in his small dormitory room and studied everything the Academy's archives contained about void maws. Most of the information focused on how deadly the creatures were, describing attack after attack in graphic detail. But Marcus was looking for something else, something that every other researcher seemed to have ignored. He found it buried in a footnote of a scientific paper written 300 years ago by a Kelzari biologist who had observed void maws from a safe distance for several months before being evacuated. The creatures appeared to be endothermic. The footnote read, constantly seeking external heat sources due to the cold environment of Nexer 7. They were observed clustering around geothermal vents and warm-blooded prey, even when not actively hunting. Marcus smiled to himself and began packing his bag with items that his fellow students would probably consider completely useless for a dangerous hunt. He packed thermal blankets, extra ration bars, a small music player loaded with calm and relaxing songs, and a warm jacket that he had brought from Earth. The other students were preparing weapons and traps and containment fields, but Marcus had a different plan entirely. His grandfather had been a veterinarian back on Earth, and he had taught Marcus something important when he was just a little boy. Every animal, no matter how dangerous, has needs and wants and fears. The key to working with any creature was not to dominate it or trap it, but to understand what it needed and offer it something valuable. Wolves had become dogs because humans offered them food and warmth and companionship. Horses had become partners because humans offered them protection and care. Even cats, those proud and independent creatures, had chosen to live with humans because the arrangement benefited both species. Maybe, Marcus thought as he finished packing, a void maw was not so different. Maybe it was just a cold and lonely creature on a dark and hostile world, waiting for someone to offer it something other than fear. It was probably a crazy idea, and it would probably get him killed. But Marcus had never been very good at doing things the normal way. Tomorrow he would travel to Nexer 7, and he would find out if his theory was correct. The transport ship descended through the thick atmosphere of Nexer 7, and Marcus pressed his face against the window to get his first look at the death world below. The planet was a place of eternal twilight, where the weak sun never fully rose above the horizon and shadows stretched across the landscape like living things. Massive forests of bioluminescent fungi covered the ground, glowing in shades of blue and purple and sickly green. The air outside the ship, according to the sensors, smelled like copper and tasted like fear. All students will disembark at designated landing zones, announced the ship's computer in a flat, mechanical voice. Emergency beacons are to be activated only in cases of extreme danger. Professor Vixoth Ale will be monitoring all teams from orbit. Good luck, and try not to die. The Kelzari team was the first to leave the ship, their 6 limbs carrying them quickly across the alien terrain as they deployed sonic barriers in a wide perimeter. They had brought enough equipment to capture a small army, and their leader was already barking orders at the others. The Thion team went next, their insectoid bodies chittering with nervous energy as they began constructing an elaborate electromagnetic trap. They had spent weeks designing the perfect containment system, using calculations that filled 17 data pads. The Ulithians, beings made of semi-transparent gel that could reshape themselves at will, oozed out of the ship carrying containers of specially synthesized pheromones. They believed that the right chemical mixture would attract a void maw and put it into a passive state long enough to be captured. Marcus was the last to leave, walking down the ramp with nothing but a backpack and a calm expression on his face. "Human," called out Crick Stoll from the Kelzari team. "Are you certain you do not want to borrow some of our equipment? You appear to have brought nothing useful for hunting." "I have everything I need," Marcus replied with a friendly wave. "Good luck with your sonic barriers." Crickstall's skin shifted to a confused blue color as he watched Marcus walk away into the glowing forest, but he quickly turned back to his own team's preparations. Marcus walked for several hours, moving deeper into the fungal forest until he could no longer hear or see any of the other students. The bioluminescent plants cast strange shadows everywhere, and more than once Marcus thought he saw something moving in the darkness just beyond his vision. But he did not feel afraid, and that was important. His grandfather had taught him that animals could sense fear like humans could sense heat or cold. A scared person gave off signals in their body language, their breathing, their heart rate, even their smell. Predators had evolved to detect these signals because fear usually meant easy prey. The Void Maw took this to an extreme, actually feeding on the psychic energy of terror itself. But Marcus had grown up on Earth, a planet where humans had learned to face their fears or die. His ancestors had hunted mammoths and saber-toothed tigers, had survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that would have broken any other species. Fear was a tool to humans, not a master. Marcus found a small clearing where the fungal growth was shorter and the ground was covered with soft moss-like material. He set down his backpack and began to make himself comfortable. First, he spread out one of his thermal blankets on the ground, creating a warm spot that would stand out like a beacon to any heat-seeking creature. Then he sat down, pulled out a ration bar, and began to eat his dinner as if he was simply camping in a forest back on Earth. The music player came out next, and soon soft acoustic guitar music was drifting through the alien forest, a strange and foreign sound on a world that had never known human songs. From somewhere in the darkness, he could hear the distant sounds of chaos. The Kelzari sonic barriers were making a high-pitched whine that hurt even human ears. The Thion trap was crackling with electricity. The Ulithians were arguing loudly about whether they had mixed their pheromones in the correct proportions. Marcus lay back on his thermal blanket and looked up at the bioluminescent canopy above him, watching the colors shift and pulse like a slow heartbeat. It was actually quite beautiful, he thought, once you stopped being afraid of it. Hours passed, and the sounds of the other teams grew more frantic. Marcus heard screaming from the direction of the Kelzari camp, followed by the sound of their sonic barriers overloading and exploding. He hoped they had activated their emergency beacons in time. The Thion trap made a terrible grinding noise, and then there was silence from that direction. Either the trap had worked, which seemed unlikely, or something very bad had happened. The Ulithians were the loudest, their gelatinous bodies making wet, squelching sounds as they fled through the forest. Their pheromones had apparently attracted not one void maw but two, and the creatures were not in a passive mood. Through all of this, Marcus remained in his clearing, eating ration bars and listening to music and occasionally humming along to his favorite songs. He knew the void maw would find him eventually. A heat source this obvious, combined with the complete absence of fear, would be impossible for a curious predator to ignore. And then, just as the third song on his playlist was ending, Marcus felt it. The temperature in the clearing dropped suddenly, and the bioluminescent fungi around him dimmed as if something was draining their light. The shadows at the edge of the clearing began to move in ways that had nothing to do with the wind. Something was watching him. Marcus did not turn to look, did not tense up, did not do anything that might be interpreted as fear or aggression. He simply reached into his pack, pulled out another ration bar, and began to unwrap it with slow and deliberate movements. "I know you are there," he said quietly, his voice calm and friendly. "I am not afraid of you, and I am not here to hurt you. I am just a warm creature sitting in a cold forest, and I thought you might like some company." The shadows at the edge of the clearing shifted again, and 8 points of light appeared in the darkness, eyes that glowed like dying stars. The Void Maw had found him. And now Marcus thought to himself, the real test would begin. The Void Maw was the most terrifying creature Marcus had ever seen, and he had grown up watching documentaries about Earth's most dangerous predators. Its body was made of living shadow, constantly shifting and flowing like dark water. One moment it seemed to be the size of a large dog, and the next moment it was as big as a horse. Its 8 eyes burned with cold light, studying him with an intelligence that was clearly not animal, but something far more ancient and strange. The creature's mouth opened slightly, revealing rows of teeth that seemed to exist in places that teeth should not be able to exist. A sound came from deep within its body, something between a growl and the noise of reality itself being torn apart. Marcus continued eating his ration bar. "This is pretty good," he said conversationally, holding up the food so the creature could see it. "It is supposed to taste like chocolate and peanuts, but honestly, it mostly tastes like cardboard. Still, it is warm food on a cold night, and that is something." The Void Maw tilted what might have been its head, and its 8 eyes blinked in a pattern that suggested confusion. For thousands of years, this creature and its ancestors had hunted the warm-blooded animals of Nexus 7. They had fed on fear and terror, driving their prey into panicked flight before consuming both their bodies and their final terrified thoughts. Every creature they had ever encountered had reacted the same way, with screaming, running, fighting, or freezing in helpless horror. But this strange 2-legged being was sitting on a warm blanket and eating cardboard-flavored food and talking about it as if they were having a casual conversation. Where was the fear? Where was the delicious psychic energy of terror that should be pouring off this creature in waves? The Void Maw crept closer, its shadow body flowing across the ground like spilled ink. It was trying to intimidate Marcus, trying to trigger the fear response that it needed to identify him as prey. Marcus responded by yawning. "Sorry," he said, covering his mouth politely. "It has been a long day, and I am pretty tired. Traveling across space always makes me sleepy for some reason." The creature stopped moving, clearly uncertain about what to do next. Its entire hunting strategy was based on fear, and this human was not cooperating at all. Meanwhile, in orbit above Nexus 7, Professor Vixad Allo was watching the feed from Marcus's body camera with all 4 of his mouths hanging open in shock. "What is the human doing?" asked his teaching assistant, a young Kelzari named Thrix. "Why is he not running, or fighting, or activating his emergency beacon?" "I have no idea," the professor admitted, his skin cycling through colors so fast that it was making Thrix dizzy. "But if he survives the next few minutes, I want to study him almost as much as I want to study the Void Maw." Back in the clearing, Marcus slowly reached into his pack and pulled out a second thermal blanket. He unfolded it carefully, making sure his movements were slow and non-threatening, and spread it on the ground next to where he was sitting. "There," he said, patting the warm fabric. "I noticed that you seem to like heat. This planet is pretty cold, and I bet it is hard to stay warm when your body is made of shadows. This blanket is designed to retain thermal energy, so it should feel pretty nice if you want to try it." The Void Maw made a sound that was impossible to describe, something like a question mark translated into audio form. No prey had ever offered it anything before. No creature had ever treated it as something other than a monster to be feared and fled from. The creature's shadow body shifted and flowed, and it took a tentative step toward the thermal blanket. Then it stopped, watching Marcus with suspicion in its 8 glowing eyes. "It is okay," Marcus said gently, using the same tone of voice his grandfather had used with frightened animals. "I am not going to hurt you. I am not going to trap you. I just thought you might be cold and lonely out here in the dark, and I have plenty of blanket to share. Another step forward. The void maw was now close enough that Marcus could have reached out and touched it, though he was smart enough not to try that yet. My name is Marcus, he continued, keeping his voice low and calm. I am a human from a planet called Earth. We have lots of scary predators on my world too, you know? We have sharks that swim in the ocean and lions that run across the grasslands and bears that can tear a person apart with one swing of their paw. But we also learn that most predators are not evil or cruel. They are just animals trying to survive, just like everyone else. The void maw lowered its body toward the thermal blanket, and Marcus could see that it was testing the warmth with whatever senses it used to perceive the world. Humans have a strange habit, Marcus said, slowly reaching for another ration bar. We like to make friends with dangerous creatures. Thousands of years ago, we convinced wolves to live with us and help us hunt. We tamed horses and rode them across continents. We even made friends with cats, although honestly, I think the cats might have actually tamed us. He opened the ration bar and broke it in half, setting one piece on the edge of the thermal blanket. I do not know if you can eat this, he admitted, but I wanted to offer you something. Where I come from, sharing food is how we show that we want to be friends. The void maw's shadow body rippled, and it reached out with something that might have been a tendril or a paw, or something that did not have a name in any human language. It touched the ration bar, and the food dissolved into darkness, absorbed into the creature's strange form. A sound came from the void maw, and it took Marcus a moment to realize what it was. The creature was purring. It was a deep and resonant sound, like a cat's purr mixed with distant thunder, and it made the air vibrate in ways that were not entirely physical. Marcus smiled and leaned back on his blanket, being careful not to make any sudden movements. There you go, he said softly. Not so scary after all, are you? Just cold and hungry and curious, like every other living thing in the universe. The void maw settled onto the thermal blanket, its shadow body spreading out to absorb as much warmth as possible. Its 8 eyes never left Marcus, but the glow in them had changed from predatory intensity to something that looked almost like wonder. And above them, watching through the body camera feed, Professor Vixot made a decision that would change galactic xenobiology forever. Cancel the retrieval shuttles for the other teams, he ordered. I want every camera and sensor we have focused on this clearing. We are witnessing something that has never happened before in recorded history. The night on Nexus 7 passed slowly, but Marcus did not sleep. He stayed awake watching the void maw, and the void maw stayed awake watching him. It was a strange kind of staring contest, except neither of them was trying to win. They were simply two curious beings from different worlds, trying to understand each other. The creature had fully settled onto the thermal blanket now, its shadow body spread out like a dark puddle of living night. Every few minutes, a small tendril would reach out toward Marcus, testing the warmth radiating from his human body. Humans ran hot by galactic standards, Marcus knew. Most species in the galaxy had body temperatures several degrees lower than humans, and some of them found human warmth almost uncomfortable. But for a creature that lived on a cold and dark world, hunting for heat wherever it could find it, a human must have seemed like a walking furnace. You really are beautiful, Marcus said quietly, watching the way the creature's body shifted and flowed. I bet no one has ever told you that before. Everyone is too busy being scared to notice how amazing you are. The void maw made that strange purring sound again, and Marcus could feel it vibrating in his chest. As the hours passed, Marcus began to talk more, telling the creature about his life on Earth and his journey to the Galactic Academy. He talked about his grandfather and the lessons he had learned about animals. He talked about his dreams of becoming a xenobiologist and studying creatures that no human had ever seen before. The void maw listened to every word, Its 8 eyes focused on Marcus with intense concentration. Whether it understood human speech was impossible to know, but it clearly understood tone and emotion. Whenever Marcus's voice became warm and gentle, the creature would purr. Whenever he laughed at his own jokes, the creature would make a sound that might have been alien laughter. "I think I will call you Patches," Marcus announced at one point. "I know that is a silly name for an ancient shadow predator from a death world, but you remind me of a cat I had when I was little. He was black and mysterious, and everyone was afraid of him, but he was actually the sweetest animal I ever knew." The newly named Patches made a sound that could have been approval or could have been complete indifference to human naming conventions. As the weak sun of Nexer 7 began to rise above the horizon, casting the world in dim gray light, something remarkable happened. Patches stood up from the thermal blanket and moved toward Marcus. The creature's shadow body flowed around him, not attacking or threatening, but wrapping around him like a protective cloak. It was surprisingly warm for something made of darkness, and Marcus realized that Patches was sharing the heat it absorbed during the night. "Oh," Marcus said, his voice catching with emotion. "You are giving me warmth because I gave warmth to you. That is actually really sweet." Patches made a rumbling sound that seemed to say, "Obviously, stupid human." This is how friendship works in a language that needed no translation. Far above them in orbit, Professor Vixothel had not slept either. He had spent the entire night watching the impossible scene unfold on his monitor, drinking cup after cup of stimulant beverages and muttering to himself in disbelief. "Thrix," he said to his teaching assistant, "pull up the full file on humans. I need to understand what we are dealing with here." Thrix accessed the Galactic database and projected the human species file onto the main screen. It was a long document, filled with warnings and observations from dozens of species who had encountered humans over the years. "Native to Earth, a Category 7 death world," Thrix read aloud. "Persistent predators with exceptional endurance. Highly social with strong pack-bonding instincts. Known to form emotional attachments to non-human creatures, including predators. Warning: humans may attempt to befriend any animal regardless of danger level." "That last part is clearly not an exaggeration," Professor Vixothel muttered. "There is more, Professor," Thrix continued. "Historical records show that humans have domesticated wolves, a pack predator similar to void maws in some ways, and turned them into loyal companions called dogs. They have also tamed horses, cattle, cats, birds, and numerous other species. Human scientists believe this trait evolved because early humans gained survival advantages from forming alliances with other animals." The professor's skin shifted to a thoughtful purple color. "So the human is using an instinct that evolved on his home world," he mused. "He is treating the void moor the same way his ancestors treated wolves. He's offering warmth and food and companionship, hoping that the creature will respond positively." "It seems to be working," Thrix observed. "It seems to be working remarkably well," the professor agreed. Back on the planet's surface, Marcus was now walking through the fungal forest with Patches flowing beside him like a living shadow. The creature had not left his side since they first made contact, and it showed no signs of wanting to leave. Marcus needed to find food and water, and Patches seemed to understand this. The creature guided him through the forest, steering him away from dangerous areas and toward a small stream where the water was clean and safe to drink. "You know this forest really well," Marcus said, kneeling by the stream to fill his water container. "I bet you have lived here your whole life." Patches made a sound that might have been confirmation. "It must be lonely," Marcus continued, his voice soft with sympathy. "Being the apex predator means you do not have anyone to talk to. Everyone either runs away or tries to kill you. You never get to just have a friend." The void maw's 8 eyes dimmed slightly, and for a moment the creature looked almost sad. Marcus reached out slowly, giving Patches plenty of time to move away if it wanted to. When the creature did not retreat, he gently placed his hand on its shadow body. The sensation was strange, like touching cold silk that was somehow also warm at the same time. "Well, you have a friend now," Marcus said. "I know I am just a weird human from another planet, and I know we have only known each other for one night. But I promise I am not going to run away from you or try to hurt you. If you want, we can be lonely together." Patches made a sound that was definitely not a growl. It was something softer, something vulnerable, something that no galactic scientist would have believed a void maw was capable of making. And then the creature did something that made Professor Vixothel fall out of his chair in shock. It nuzzled against Marcus's chest like an oversized cat asking for pets. Marcus laughed with pure joy and began to scratch behind what approximated the creature's ears. And Patches purred so loudly that the sound echoed through the entire forest. "Good shadow monster," Marcus said affectionately. "Who is a terrifying apex predator?" "You are! Yes, you are!" In orbit, Professor Vixothel picked himself up off the floor and stared at the monitor with all four of his eyes. "Thrix," he said slowly, "update the human species file." "What should I add, Professor?" "Add a new warning," Vixothel replied. "Humans will adopt literally anything. Do not leave them unattended near fauna of any kind." The extraction shuttle landed in a clearing near the original drop zone, and Marcus walked toward it with Patches flowing beside him like a loyal shadow. The other students had already been evacuated hours earlier. The Kelzari team had suffered 2 members who needed medical treatment for panic-induced cardiac events. The Thyran had lost all their equipment when their electromagnetic trap exploded. The Ulithians were still traumatized from being chased by 2 void maws for 3 hours straight. Not a single team had succeeded in capturing a specimen, and several students were already talking about dropping out of the academy entirely. When the shuttle door opened and the surviving students saw Marcus walking toward them, they froze in absolute terror. Because walking beside him, close enough to touch, was a void maw. "Everybody stay calm," Marcus called out in a friendly voice. "This is Patches. Patches is friendly now. There is no need to be scared." Crystal, the Kelzari who had refused to let Marcus join his team, made a high-pitched squeaking sound that his species only produced during moments of extreme fear. "Human," he gasped, his skin flashing through every color in the spectrum. "That creature killed 3 of my teammates." Well, it scared them badly enough that their hearts stopped, which is basically the same thing. "Patches did not mean to hurt anyone," Marcus explained, reaching down to pat the Void Maw's shadow body. Void Maws feed on fear, so when your teammates were terrified, Patches was just doing what came naturally. It is like blaming a plant for absorbing sunlight. Patches made a rumbling sound that might have been an apology, or might have been the creature equivalent of saying, "Your teammates were delicious." "How did you do this?" demanded a Thyran student, her mandibles clicking with agitation. "How did you tame an apex predator that has killed more galactic marines than any other creature in history?" Marcus shrugged modestly. "I just offered Patches some warmth and food and companionship. Humans have been doing this with dangerous animals for thousands of years. We call it domestication, and it is kind of our specialty." The students parted like a terrified sea as Marcus and Patches boarded the shuttle, and nobody dared to sit anywhere near them during the flight back to orbit. Professor Vixoth was waiting when the shuttle docked with the Academy's orbital station. His skin was a complex pattern of colors that nobody could quite interpret, somewhere between professional academic interest and barely contained hysteria. "Mr. Chun," the professor said, his voice carefully controlled. The assignment was to capture a void maw specimen. Marcus looked down at Patches, who was currently wrapped around his legs like an affectionate shadow scarf. "I know, Professor." But capturing seemed kind of cruel, you know? Patches is an intelligent being with feelings and preferences. Putting a creature like that in a cage felt wrong to me. So instead, you befriended it. It seemed like the better option, Marcus agreed. Professor Vixoth all stared at the human and the eldritch horror standing together like old friends, and he felt something inside his academic mind shift and rearrange itself. Mr. Chun, he said finally, you have completed the assignment in a way that no student has ever done before. You have not only obtained a living void maw specimen, but you have done so without any containment equipment, without any weapons, and without any of the specialized training that xenobiologists spend years acquiring. The other students muttered among themselves, clearly unsure whether Marcus should be praised or punished. Furthermore, the professor continued, you have collected more observational data about void maw behavior in one night than our academy has gathered in 3 centuries of research. Your body camera footage shows feeding behaviors, communication patterns, and social bonding that we never knew these creatures were capable of. Marcus felt his cheeks getting warm, which was the human way of showing embarrassment. I was just trying to make a friend, Professor. I did not think of it as a science experiment. That may be the most valuable lesson of all, Mixothel replied. We approached the void maw as a specimen to be captured and studied. You approached it as a potential friend to be understood and respected. Your method was not only more effective, but more ethical as well. The professor turned to address the assembled students, his skin shifting to the deep purple that indicated a formal announcement. Let this be a lesson to all of you. The galaxy is full of creatures that seem dangerous and terrifying and impossible to understand. But every creature, no matter how alien, has needs and desires and a capacity for connection. Sometimes, the best way to study something is not to capture it or contain it, but to simply sit down and offer it friendship. He turned back to Marcus and Patches. Mr. Chun, you receive full marks for this examination. Additionally, I am recommending you for an immediate research grant to continue your work on interspecies bonding. The Academy will provide funding, facilities, and any support you need. Thank you, Professor, Marcus said, genuinely surprised. But I do have one condition. Name it. Patches comes with me, Marcus said firmly. Wherever I go, whatever research I do, Patches is my partner now. I'm not going to abandon a friend just because other people are afraid of them. The void maw made a sound that was unmistakably pleased, and its shadow body wrapped even more tightly around Marcus in a gesture of affection and loyalty. Professor Vixoth Isle considered this for a moment, then nodded. Agreed. The Academy will make appropriate accommodations for your companion. I suspect having a void maw on campus will be quite educational for everyone. The Kelzari students in the crowd looked extremely unhappy about this development, but nobody dared to argue with the professor. Later that night, Marcus sat in his newly upgraded dormitory room with Patches curled around him like a living blanket. The Academy had given him a much larger space to accommodate his new companion, with special thermal panels to keep Patches comfortable. We did it, buddy, Marcus said, scratching behind the creature's ears. We showed them that being different does not mean being dangerous. We showed them that monsters can be friends. Patches purred contentedly, 8 eyes half closed in relaxation. I wonder what other creatures are out there in the galaxy, Marcus mused. Creatures that everyone thinks are too scary or too dangerous to approach. Maybe we can help them too. Maybe we can show the whole universe that friendship is more powerful than fear. The void maw made a sound that seemed to agree enthusiastically with this plan. And so began the legendary career of Dr. Marcus Chun, the human xenobiologist who would go on to befriend more impossible creatures than any scientist in galactic history. He tamed psychic predators on acid worlds and pack hunters on ice planets and reality-bending entities that lived in the spaces between stars. And through all of his adventures, Patches remained by his side, a terrifying shadow monster who had become the most loyal friend a human could ever ask for. The galactic databases eventually added a new entry to the human species file, a warning that was copied and shared throughout every scientific institution in known space. Warning: humans possess an irresistible compulsion to befriend dangerous creatures. Do not allow humans near fauna of any kind unless you are prepared for them to adopt it. This is not a joke. We are completely serious. They will try to pet it. They will try to feed it. They will give it a cute name. They cannot be stopped. Somewhere in the galaxy, reading this warning for the first time, a young alien student laughed and assumed it must be an exaggeration. But deep down, every species who had ever met a human knew the terrible truth. Humans would adopt anything, and the universe would never be the same.